there have been a lot of changes in the last 5 years. And the United Nations IPCC came up with a fifth assessment report, which says that on page 191, that the world now needs to remove the CO2 from the air, the atmosphere, not just to decrease to decrease carbon emissions. In other words, decreasing carbon emissions is still needed, but it's not sufficient. Now we need to remove the carbon that is already in the atmosphere to prevent catastrophic climate change, according to the IPCC Fifth Assessment Report. I used to be the lead author of the IPCC for the United States. And because of that, I knew this was coming. And 5 years ago, in the year 2010, we created a company called Global Thermostat. And I co-invented with Professor Peter Eisenberger the technology that removes carbon from air. This is the leading carbon removal from air company in the world, the most advanced. We have built already 2 plants that are operating in the Stanford Research Institute in Silicon Valley in California. And they are like small buildings, 15 feet by 10 feet by 40 feet high. And they can remove thousands of tons of CO2 per year. Our next 2 plants are going to be 10,000 tons a year in Israel to take CO2 from a power plant and provide it for desalinating water, which is a very important activity in Israel and also soon in the United States. In addition, we're building another commercial plant, and our investor, NRG, is the leading power plant company in the United States. They are the leading independent power producer in the United States, and we have closed an agreement with them in the month of February. And they have a number of plants that are subject to the regulation that the EPA has now ratified by the Supreme Court. All of this is part of a plan to essentially do what the world needs, which is to remove carbon from air. And our next plans, in addition to the 16 patents we already have, which are valid in 140 nations, is to introduce something I proposed after I worked at the Kyoto Protocol, creating the carbon market, which I designed and wrote into the protocol. Now we're trying to create the Green Power Fund that will be part of the carbon market. It's called the Clean Development Mechanism, and will allow offering the funding for poor nations to build carbon negative power plants that simultaneously produce energy for development as they need and clean the atmosphere instead of polluting it. The power plants are mostly led by fossil fuels in the world today. It's a $55 trillion infrastructure. There is a very small proportion that is less than 1%, which is solar, for example, or renewable. But the great majority is fossil. These plants emit approximately 50% of all the emissions that humans create. Our plan is to convert those plants from the biggest emitters and transform it into cleaners for the atmosphere by using our equipment. We can do that conversion. And if we do that, the poor nations could have simultaneously more energy and clean the atmosphere. And all of that will be paid for $200 billion a year for 15 years, so fast as to pay for the thousands of plants that have to be created. We can do it as part of the carbon market, Clean Development Mechanism, the carbon market, which I wrote and designed into the Kyoto Protocol, and is now spread out to 4 continents. Our technology can be added to existing power plants, but power plants are needed by poor nations. They have none, they have very few. And therefore they won't have to transform existing ones because they have very few. What they need is new power plants. With our system, they can be funded for building new power plants that allow more development from the carbon market funding, which reached $250 billion in the year 2011. We can use that funding, as it's supposed to be, for the building of carbon negative power plants in the poor nations. This scheme that I tell you, which I call the Green Power Fund, I proposed it in Copenhagen. It was partly adopted, but it needs to be fully adopted, hopefully in Paris, but probably after Paris. And once adopted, in 15 years, at $200 billion a year, we'll be able to control all the emissions of CO2 created by humans through thousands of these plants all over the world. And we already started making these plants commercial so that they can be created to produce power, which is needed everywhere, from private business for the purpose of making cash. The cash is made because the CO2 that you extract is used for beverages like Coca-Cola, like all sodas, Pepsi-Cola, and like beer. It can be used for the production of dry ice that is used by McDonald's. It can be used by greenhouses to enhance the productivity of food. It can be used to produce fertilizers to increase the productivity of the soil. And our technology can be used to produce CO2 that we take from air and is eventually used to produce synthetic gasoline, which replaces completely gasoline, doesn't require any new infrastructure, can run on existing cars, and it cleans the atmosphere because it's produced from the carbon that you take from air. We want not just to use this for the production of carbon negative power plants that clean the atmosphere while they produce air, but also for the creation of awards, prizes, and crowdfunding that would allow people from all over the world that want to reach us and participate to take part on this. And we will have, through a system of franchises, the opportunity for the best ideas to be given a license, which will be very inexpensive, so that they can create their mini global thermostat plants, and this can spread as fast as needed, which is critical for resolving the climate change problem.